Hi everyone, this is Darren here, and today I'm going to teach you on the topics of direct and inverse proportions. So I'll start off with direct proportions, and you may be wondering what is direct proportions, and so this would be the textbook definition of what are direct proportions. So I would like you to focus on actually just this equation here, y equals kx. So now y equals kx, it just signifies that when x increases, the magnitude of y increases. So, okay, now let me give you an example. This is always the case for direct proportions. So again, y equals kx. Now, you may be wondering, let's say, what if k was negative and x goes up, doesn't y go down? You're right. Remember the exact wording I used was the magnitude of it. So, even if k was, y equals to, k was instead, let's say negative 2x, x equals 1, y equals minus 2, x equals 2, y equals to negative 4. So as you can see, as x goes up, magnitude of y goes up, even though it's negative. So think about it in absolute terms. 4 is greater than 2, so the value of y is going up along with x, although not exactly up because of the negative sign. So don't get confused by that, but just know that for direct proportions, x goes up. When x increases, y increases. So of course, this is the more complicated example, whereby k is a negative number. Now k can also be a positive number. So if k was a positive number, this is fairly straightforward. So equals to 3x. So if x was 1, y will be 3, x was 2, y will be 6, etc. So that is just some things you need to know for direct and inverse proportions. And then for inverse proportions, so again, for inverse proportions, this is the textbook definition of inverse proportions. But again, I want you to focus on this equation. So y equals to k over x. So this is just signifying that when x increases, the magnitude of y decreases. So now, let us work on some examples. Okay, so we have our first example over here. So in this our first example, what happens is the question is saying that y is directly proportional to x plus 1. So what they mean is, if let's say the question writes y is directly proportional to x plus 1, they're saying that we should write down this equation y equals to k multiplied by the whole bracket of x plus 1 close bracket. So then usually questions will give example of what the numbers would be in one instance. So they say that when y equals 4, x equals 3. And then they ask us to find the value of x when y equals 10. So in this example, what we have to do is substitute these two values inside this equation. So let's see what happens. This would then be 4 equals to k 3 plus 1. So in this case, 4 equals to 4k, and then k is just equal to 1. Okay, so we have found what k is. That is really great. So we have to put k into the equation now. So we have found k. So the idea of direct and inverse proportions, every time, what we have to do to start off the equation is always you have to find what is k. Once we have found k, it's really simple. Let me show you what I mean. So now that we have found k, we can just say y equals to 1 x plus 1. Okay, because I replaced the k by 1. So now they asked us to find the value of x when y equals 10. We can simply do that, right? So we say now y, instead of it being y, will be 10. So 10 equals to, so this is just, I'm going to multiply it in straight away. It's just going to be equals to x plus 1. And therefore, we can say that x equals to x equals to 9. So this will be the answer for this question and this simple example here. In this second example, it is on an inverse proportion question, and I really like this example because it actually helped me to answer real world problems. And also, I recall that in primary school, I used to have some difficulties with questions, some problem sums that were actually inverse proportion happening. By the time, they did not teach us inverse proportion, so we had to use other ways to solve it. But now that we learn inverse proportion, it actually makes those questions easier, and I really appreciate why maths help us to solve real world problems. So okay, without further ado, we have this question here. So in this example, we have to realize that they are talking about an inverse proportion. And how are we able to realize it's inverse proportion and not direct proportion? That's a very important thing here. Because why? If we were to say y equals to kx, or y equals to k over x, if we were to use this instead of this for this question, we would be wrong. And how do we identify? So, okay, you have thought about it and you realize that how do you actually identify whether it's inverse proportion or direct proportion is that if you think about it, let's say you tweaked the number of men. Think about it logically. If I said there were more men painting a house, would it go by faster or go by slower? So logically, if more men were painting a house, the house would be painted faster, assuming all of the men are doing some work, right? And they are not slacking off. Okay, but so in this example here, if we have this logic in our brain, we then realize that therefore, if there were more men, the house would be painted faster. So as men goes up, time to completion goes down. So therefore, we are going to use y equals k over x. So that's how you identify whether to use inverse proportion or direct proportion. Alright. So we have to use y equals k over x for this question. So now what happens is that 5 men, 8 hours. So how do we just should substitute into this equation. So let's see. We should substitute as thus. We also have to think about it as we substitute, okay? Should men go here or men go here? And time go here or time go here? Think about it again. So we are saying that the completion of the house getting painted is k, right? So we have to assume that the total job of painting the house, the amount of time needed is k. So if I say this, the total amount of time divided by amount of time, will it be men? Doesn't make sense. Because I'm just simply taking a time here, dividing by a time, and this time doesn't really get to work on the job, right? So in this case, the men get to work on the job. So k is the job, how big the job is. How many hours you need to complete, how many hours of men working you need to use to complete painting the house. So the men go into x, and the time is y. So that's how we identify. We need to use logic and decipher and think which number goes where. So now, simply, you can just say 8 equals to k over 5. Therefore, k will be 40. So now we have identified that the total man hours needed to complete painting the house is 40 hours. Alright, so that's a really good, important step. So now let me just change this equation again now that we have found k. So I'll change this and write y equals 40 over x. So now the question asks us, how long will it take 2 men to paint the house? We know that men goes into x, so just substitute x by 2, y equals 40 over 2, and therefore y equals 20. So the total time taken to paint the house, if 2 men were to paint it, would be just 20 hours. I hope you learned something from this video, and if you did like the video, please like and subscribe. Thank you.